that life revolves around us being thankful. It revolves around our relationship, our daily relationship with you, Father. And it revolves around us being watchful to see you at work in and around our lives, Father. So bless Andy as he comes to share with us this morning. In Jesus' name, amen.
I hope I don't need that gem. 'em on. Yeah? Oh, good. Look, I want to thank you all again. Thank Ken for the opportunity to stand up and share some thoughts with you. It is a genuine honor, and those of you who do it know that so well. One of the fascinating and somewhat perplexing things about language, and the English language at least in particular, is that it keeps changing. When I was a wee lad and we played word games like Scrabble, the dictionary was always the final arbiter. If it wasn't in the dictionary, it didn't exist. Yeah. Then I discovered that they add more than 500 words to the dictionary every year. One of the dictionaries has 4 editions every year. Yeah. Is my PowerPoint not working? Doesn't matter. Have you ever described anything as fantastic? Hey, Ken, I'm sorry, you described God as fantastic this morning. Don't take offense. Ever described somebody as scoring a fantastic goal, Gary? Or ever told somebody that they had made a fantastic meal? Yeah. See, the thing is, what that word meant years ago was something imaginary. The stuff of fantasy, which is where we get the word from. So actually what you were telling your friend was they'd scored an imaginary goal. And guys, just be careful you don't tell your mum after she slaved all day that meal she cooked was an imaginary meal. So what happens if we hear a word and we don't understand what the person intended to say? Linda's great at giving me directions when I'm driving. I mean that. I'm not mucking about. She is brilliant at finding our way to the most obscure places. But when we're driving along and she says to me, turn right here or turn left there, very often I'll look at her and I'll say, now, which direction do you mean? Because she has been known to muddle up the word right and the word left and say left when she means right. I'm seeing some people nod. And that might be funny at times, but when I'm driving and we're late for a wedding and I can't afford to get it wrong, I'm going to look at her and I'm going to say, right, which way do you mean? Because I don't care what words she used, I need to know what she meant. So if I use the word prayer or pray, what do you understand by that word? And we can't afford to get that word wrong either, because in the sentence that we're studying this morning from Paul's letter to the church in Colossae, we read these words, devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful. And those words are for me too, and they're for you. And if I'm going to devote myself to anything, I want to know what's really expected of me. So I want to know that I've properly understood what Paul meant when he said the word prayer. So I wonder what comes into your mind when you hear the word prayer. What's the first thing that comes to mind? I haven't checked this, but I'm going to guess that if we asked 100 people, what do they think of when they think of praying? Probably all 100 of them would say something like this. Asking God for something. Asking God earnestly for something. Pleading with God for something or on behalf of someone. Begging God to do something. Is that what Paul is asking us to devote ourselves to? It's going to be a little bit challenging. I hope it's going to be okay. Is that what Paul is asking us to devote ourselves to? Isn't that what people who don't know God do? They ask him for stuff. Then they get angry with him when he doesn't give them what they asked for. They decide that he doesn't even exist because he didn't give them the stuff they asked for. Do you remember what Jesus said? I don't often quote from Eugene Peterson's version of what Jesus said, but I was reading it as I was preparing for this, and I thought, that is so powerful. I'm going to use what Eugene Peterson translated. This is Eugene Peterson's version from Matthew chapter 6, verse 7, what Jesus said. Jesus said, "The world is full of so-called prayer warriors who are prayer ignorant. They're full of formulas and programs and advice, peddling techniques for getting what you want from God." Don't fall for that nonsense. This is your Father you're dealing with. So I just want to ask you, is that what Paul was challenging the church in Colossae to devote itself to? Asking God over and over and over again for stuff until he's finally worn down and gives in. Thing is, English words are pretty much irrelevant if we want to know what Paul meant, because he didn't speak English. And what he wanted us to devote ourselves to was this. Prosuke. What on earth is that? Well, it's actually a contraction of two Greek words. Pros means moving towards in order to engage with. It assumes contact and reaction. Now, if a ball is moving towards a living room window, I think it's pretty safe to assume that there's going to be some contact and some reaction, not just on the part of the glass, but on the part of the person who owns the house. But there's no purpose driving the ball. It's just a dumb, heavy weight with momentum and a lot more energy than the glass has. It's different between people. Two people moving towards each other sets up a cycle of initiation and response. One acts, the other responds, and that triggers a response in the other person who started it, and so on. That's the Greek word pros. And the second part, euche, well, that just means to wish. You know, those secret desires buried down in your heart. That's suke. And so when you put those two ideas together, what do you get? You get two people moving into each other's circle, engaging with each other, listening to each other, learning about each other, each expressing their deepest wishes to the other and listening to the wishes of the other and responding to what's in the heart of the other. And here's the thing, not necessarily so that those wishes might be fulfilled, but because those wishes reveal the secrets that are in the heart of the other. That's what Paul was writing about. That's what he wanted the disciples in Colossae to be devoted to, and not with each other, but with God. He wanted the people he loved to be continually and increasingly drawn into the circle of encounter with God, to hear his heart, to share their heart, to know him, to respond to him in the way that he continuously, graciously responds to them. And I love words. And when that word opened up to me like a flower, it just completely overtook any notion that I had of asking earnestly or begging or trying to twist God's arm to do what I wanted. And so I went looking for a word to try to capture this. See, using the word prayer, if it gives all those other ideas, is a bit like Linda telling me to turn right when she really means left. The word prayer isn't going to be helpful if it doesn't convey the right meaning. And for a long time, the only word that I could think of, forgive me, was the word dating. When a guy takes a girl out on a date, they begin to move towards each other. They begin to allow each other into their circle of trust. And the purpose of doing so is so that they can engage with each other. I mean, can you imagine two people going out on a date and sitting in the cinema side by side, and when the movie's over, they get up and they walk out and they go their separate ways? That's not a date. That's barely making contact. I know a fellow and girl that did that. Yeah. On a date, the intention is that two people will start to understand each other. They'll start to share with each other their hopes and their dreams. They'll pay attention to each other. They'll grow to sacrifice their hopes and dreams in favor of the other one as their love for each other grows. But I didn't think you would allow me to use the word date. Devote yourself to dating God. The meaning might be right, but the concept or the image it projects is a bit weird. So I looked for another place where we use this word or this idea, prosuke. And last Saturday, I asked one of our good friends to help me describe it. And if Jim can get his technology working.
All right, so I was at the play park with my family, having a nice family day, and some crazy looking guy comes up and it's like, hey, would you mind recording a video to explain what an American football huddle is? All right, I guess. Only joking. So in American football, there are plays, right? There's certain plays that happen, and like the guy who runs with the ball, the running back, it does a certain thing, and the wide receiver, the guy who catches the ball, does a certain thing, and the quarterback knows everything that's going on, but everybody else doesn't know. So the whole team will get together, they'll tell everybody what the play is about to be, what the strategic goal is about to be, because he knows what's going on, but everybody else doesn't. So he needs to let everybody know what's about to happen, and then afterwards they all say break, right? And so the linemen, the guy who are guarding the quarterback, know how to block, the running back knows what he's gonna do, wide receivers know their routes, how they're gonna run, so that they can go out and execute the plan properly. Does that make sense? That is an American football huddle. I thought this was a good setting to explain that too, right? Look at this, there they go. All right, talk to you guys later, bye.
Thanks, Russell. So what's a huddle? It's all about people coming together intentionally, paying attention to a captain, to learn the wishes of the captain, maybe even to report back to the captain, hopefully to be better bonded together, and certainly to become inspired for their next move. Might have started out in American football, but these days, huddles appear everywhere. Every business journal you read, they're writing about huddling regularly. Health workers practice huddling. Even the England cricket team huddles. And can I be radical and suggest that you pause for a second and think about what Paul was asking these followers of Jesus in Colossae to do? Maybe the idea that he had for them was much more like a huddle or a date than a begging or a pleading appeal to God to do something for them. I think Paul wanted these early followers of Jesus to move toward God, to move intentionally toward God, with the specific purpose of engaging with him, to pay attention to what's in his heart, to become inspired by him, to build trust in him and respond to his desires, to share in turn what's in their heart, entrusting those precious secrets to him, learning the next step, but never far away from the next huddle, devoted to huddling with God. And you know what? I'm pretty sure that most of you already know this instinctively and do it. But I just thought this was such a beautiful idea that I thought it was worth the time to actually describe it. But to Paul's next word, a huddle without paying attention is pointless. There's hardly a night goes by that I don't get into bed, and when I'm lying there, I thank God for the richness of his kindness to me. But I got to tell you that on many of those nights, I'm so exhausted that I can hardly form the thoughts in my mind that I want to express to God, let alone pay attention to him. Paul says to his readers, be devoted to huddling with God and be watchful. Are you careful to pick the time when you enter a huddle with God? Last thing at night when you're getting into bed may not be the best time, the time when you're most alert. Directly after a big dinner, when your body just wants to get on with digestion, might not be the best time. Driving in heavy traffic might seem like a great opportunity to spend time with God, but is it really the time when you can concentrate on him? Does he get your best time? Paul says, be watchful, be alert, be vigilant. Why does that matter? Well, it matters for two reasons. It matters, first of all, because none of us want to be caught flat-footed. You know that expression? Do you remember the story that Jesus told about the man who returned home after some late night event? And when he got to the house, he was greeted by his staff as if it was the middle of the day. All the lights were on, the house was busy, his staff were fully dressed, looking smart, at attention, ready for whatever was going to happen. They opened the door as soon as he arrived. And it sent an important message to the master of the house. It told him his staff could be depended on. You see, Jesus said, thieves don't send you a schedule of when they're going to call at your house to rob it. If they did, you could make sure that you were watchful that night. But you don't know in advance. So your only option is to be alert all the time. And when that master of the house arrived home and he found his staff fully dressed and on the alert, do you know what that told him? It told him that they had his interests at heart. It wasn't their house. It wasn't their stuff. But what mattered to him mattered to them. And that night, that man put on an apron. Late at night though it was, he put on an apron, he rolled up his sleeves, he sat his staff down at the dinner table, and he served them. And Jesus told that story. That man was a picture of his Father in heaven. Do you get it? Be on the watch. Be alert. Can you imagine being the one member of staff who had gone to bed early that night? Missed out on the party. Be watchful. Be on the alert. The plans of God are at stake. And you don't want to be caught flat-footed. But it matters for another reason. It matters because you don't want to be out of the loop when God's at work. Peter and James and John are absolute giants of the church. But they got it wrong one night. And if we'd been in their shoes, we'd have missed the point just as badly as they did. So let's not speak badly of them. But they had been with Jesus as their invincible rabbi for 3 years. This was the rabbi who turned around and walked through that lynch mob at Nazareth when they couldn't lay a hand on him. They wanted to kill him, but they couldn't lay a hand on him. This was the rabbi who answered so effectively the officers that were sent by the Jewish leaders that instead of arresting him, they went back to their leaders and they said, "No man ever spoke like this man." This was the rabbi who stood up in the boat in the middle of the storm and told the wind and the waves to lie down, and they obeyed him. So when he asked them to come with him on the night he went to huddle with his Father, and he asked them to keep watch, they missed what was going on. They must have figured, he's got it covered. He always does. If they had only known what the next 48 hours was going to bring, they could never have slept. But they were out of the loop because they weren't paying attention. They didn't keep watch. And when Jesus returned to find them sleeping, he simply asked them, "Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour?" They missed his anguish. They missed his loneliness. It never entered their head that he was entering a battle for the universe, the greatest battle in human history. That night, they were in the company of God's champion, and they missed it. They were out of the loop because they weren't keeping watch. You don't want to be out of the loop when God's at work. So Paul says, be watchful. And finally, he adds, when you huddle with God, be thankful. How can I unpack that? Can you see that that is the very antithesis of where we started, the very antithesis of the act of begging or requesting? Do you see that want is never satisfied? But being thankful leaves no room for want. Want says, I've missed out on something. Being thankful says, I'm overflowing. Want is always looking for. Being thankful is always enjoying having. Want focuses on me. Being thankful focuses on God. I kind of accidentally came across this quote by Charles Spurgeon as I was preparing my PowerPoint. I was looking for a picture and I came across this quote and I just felt I had to include it. Charles Spurgeon said, "It's not how much we have, but how much we enjoy that makes happiness." And I know life is hard. For me, like you, the past months have been very difficult. And there were times in the past few weeks, and in the past week in particular, that I was too distracted by everything that was going on to be able to properly prepare what I had to say this morning. And I hope that some of it has been from God to your soul. Life is hard, yes. But be thankful. Why? And how? Well, I'm wrapping up here. And as one answer among many to that perennial question, how do I be thankful in the midst of all this? I want to go back to Eugene Peterson. My goodness, quoting Eugene Peterson twice in one sermon, that's a first for me. But these are the words that he used to express what Paul wrote to the Corinthians. Paul said, "If you only look at us, you might well miss the brightness. We carry this precious message around in the unadorned clay pots of our ordinary lives. And that's to prevent anyone from confusing God's incomparable power with us. As it is, there's not much chance of that. You know for yourselves that we're not much to look at. We've been surrounded and battered by troubles, but we're not demoralized. We're not sure what to do, but we know that God knows what to do. We've been spiritually terrorized, but God hasn't left our side. We've been thrown down, but we haven't broken. What they did to Jesus, they do to us. Trial and torture, mockery and murder. And what Jesus did among them, he does in us. He lives. Our lives are at constant risk for Jesus' sake, which makes Jesus' life all the more evident in us. So we're not giving up. How could we? Even though on the outside it often looks like things are falling apart on us, on the inside, where God is making a new life, not a day goes by without his unfolding grace. These hard times are small potatoes compared with the coming good times, the lavish celebration prepared for us. There's far more here than meets the eye. The things we see now, here today, gone tomorrow. But the things we can't see will last forever. Church, huddle up. Huddle up with God. Be on the alert. Don't be caught flat-footed. Don't find yourselves out of the loop of what God is doing. And be thankful. There's not a day goes by without his unfolding grace.